So I want to start off, I know a lot of you know most of these guys, but I want to, you guys introduce yourself. Did you buy, sell, and sort of how did you get here today?
Yeah, so Tom Andrulis, CEO of ITS. Back in 2016, we started doing partnerships and some mergers and some acquisitions. Did about 8 of those deals with no money. Finally, then brought private equity in and then completed 5 more transactions over the last 7 months or so.
David Javahiri, Direct IT. I sold my company and I started with last year running for Better Your Best. When my numbers were in the open, magically 3 weeks later, I got 3 calls from 3 different companies, and I sold to one of them.
Nice.
Yeah, Michael Glasser, sold my MSP about 21 months ago. We were based out of New York, fully vertical in the legal market, and I was actually acquired by a strategic buyer in that same space, and we all only specialize in legal-focused area.
Cool. And my name is Will Nobles, and I'm out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we've acquired 3 companies so far. So David, interesting, you came into Robin's world, you won Better Your Best, and you sold your company quickly. Talk about that process and how that all came about so quickly.
Sure. So when I got approached after Better Your Best, my EBITDA for the year was in the open. So, and I had no intention of staying in the company. So I had a lot of plans to grow even more. But I got approached by 3 different companies. And the one company that I sold to, Evergreen Services, they're the only one who allowed me to stay, don't roll over, run the company 100% the way I wanted it. And that was in the contract. They said they're willing to put in the contract. That became very attractive and changed my mind, because originally I didn't want to sell. I said no to all 3 of them. But that was the best thing, because I had no intention of leaving, and I had so much plan in my head of what I'm going to do. So that was the reason that I ended up selling.
And Tom, on your side, why did you, because you said you purchased 8 before you had PE money.
Yep.
Why did you go the PE route? So if people are looking at buying companies or whatever, what attracted you to go in the PE route?
Yeah, I think on the first 8 transactions, it was all just bootstrap. We had no cash, so we either had to figure out how to merge companies or form some unique partnership or give somebody an earn-out or something along those lines. And it is difficult, but we got to the place where a $4 or $5 million EBITDA number that was attractive to private equity, and we were saying, okay, if private equity would come in, become a platform company for them, we could use their financial backing to then complete additional transactions, make it a little bit easier going forward.
Okay. Okay, so Michael, when we were talking earlier, what made you go the route that you did, and maybe go a little bit in depth on the route that you went?
Yeah, I mean, so actually, my company wasn't on the market. I was not even preparing to sell. I was happening to talking to somebody, and they're like, hey, I just joined this other organization, and do you want to talk to them? I'm like, I'm really not interested in selling, but I said, it doesn't hurt taking a call, so I took the call. I had been in Robin's with Greg Crabtree, so I had an understanding of where my valuation should be, I thought, in my mind. And since they were a strategic buyer in my own space of just legal vertical, there was a lot of synergies there. And I just felt comfortable with it, and we just kept going a little further and bantered some numbers back and forth, and you do that dance. And I also liked and respected the people I thought I'd be working with and be there, and it's turned out great so far.
So your buyer bought you because you had a very niche target market, correct? Talk a little bit about that, and where your niche was, where it matches theirs, and why that was so important, getting a higher EBITDA.
Yeah, so I've always been 95% in the legal space, fully vertical legal space. It's where I became the trusted expert advisor to everyone, and it worked out very well. As Robin says, you can always make sure you can get your value, your full value, if you are the expert in that field. And I've always was that. And so when the company came in and they saw what I'm doing and how they're doing it, and they're also in a similar kind of space, it just was a logical, natural synergy in that. And also it helped the multiples tremendously, because of being vertical in that space, I got a much higher multiple than what I've been hearing talked about now.
Yep. So a lot of people, and probably they come to you, or that, the expectation of what the value of the company is actually worth, right? We all wish our company was worth $100 million, right? But a lot of times people come and their evaluation of what they think it's worth and what it's really worth is two different things. How did that line up when you guys sold? I mean, I know you guys were going through Robin, Greg Crabtree and stuff, so you sort of had a good number. But how can you help people set the expectation on the evaluation portion?
I think when you run your books in your company, if it's run properly, you're not milking it for private expenses and personal expenses, and you've got everything set up correctly. When you do get to that stage where they're really looking into your books and they see that everything is above board and in order and not having to figure out that somebody was draining money somewhere else out of the business, and they look back over a few-year period and they can see that earnings is consistent and the clients are consistent and the revenue. I heard somebody say before you only get like 14 cents on the dollar for hardware revenue. I get full because I'm consistent in my margins. I had great margins in hardware and even software licensing and things like that. If you're consistent with that, you're going to get paid a better value on that. So that's was for me.
Yeah, I agree. You have to keep your books straight for multiple years, or at least be able to point where the expenses go, if it's for personal or you have your own car through the company. As long as you can categorize them and put them in proper order, then your books are good. And a lot of training we had here. We're talking about it. You, Will, specifically Robin. So I pretty much knew from the table that how much I'm going to get, my expectation. And the fact that I had 3 companies, I was able to negotiate and get one over what I should have normally get, the multiples.
Tom?
Yeah, for me, I think there's a lot of conversation around multiples, right? And people hear these high double-digit multiples that are out there. For me, I talked to a lot of different people, like, hey, if my EBITDA is here, what's the range? If my EBITDA is here, what's the range? And so on and so forth. And then I know when Rob Schenk and I did our merger back in 2021, we actually hired an outside firm. It's like, hey, we'll pay X amount of thousands of dollars. Look at all of our books, run through it like it was a transaction. Tell us what you think each of us is worth, and then what we're worth together, and then come up with that number. So we got a bit of a third-party, insight into what someone else thinks our business is worth versus us just saying, hey, it's worth, $100 million.
Yeah. Sure. So if you guys have questions, go up to the mic. Feel free to ask any questions to any of us here. David, you mentioned something about running personal expenses through the business and not treating. Let's talk about not treating your company like a piggy bank, right? What does the owners here need to prep themselves with in cleaning their books up when it comes to that?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you have a car that you use it mostly for the company, that, to me, that's something you can run through the company. But yeah, you don't want your groceries to be on the company and your personal expenses to be on the company. You want to keep it clean, but there's a fine line between personal business and the company business. And just make sure that line is not crossed.
Michael?
For me, it's talking about also making sure you're taking reasonable compensation out of the business. That, I hear a lot of people when we talk on these calls, only taking 100, 150,000 out of the business a year. I guess it depends on what levels you're at. And then, if you then want to increase yourself to a higher salary and more, that actually comes off your EBITDA. So you got to make yourself, you're paying yourself a reasonable compensation. What is ownership role versus developing the business kind of role and things like that, and that can affect your valuation as well. So we just got a fine line there between paying yourself and what's reasonable and what that valuation will get back on that numbers.
And the definition of reasonable is not so reasonable either, right? You get a CPA to tell you one thing, the IRS probably will tell you something different. You get some PE firm that might tell you. Tom, what do you think is reasonable in your opinion?
Yeah, for me, I ran a lot of expenses through the business, right? I think the question is, if we sell the business, then would I still run those things through the company after the sale? Or would someone say, hey, why am I paying your home internet? Or why am I paying your cell phone bills? Am I going to get questions like that? So I tried to use my best judgment to say, all right, with all these different expenses that I had, I took all those and I moved them out of my P&L to the bottom into other expenses category. And I was able to just kind of make that my my bucket of questionable, gray area expenses, let's call it. And so then I could see what my profitability was on the top part of the P&L, and I could present that to different people and say, hey, here's how the business runs. Here's the stuff that I don't think you need, but I'm pushing through the business anyways, currently as a current owner. And it made it easier to get to a true EBITDA number versus trying to pull all this stuff out and say, oh, well, that's an add back, and that's an add back, and that's an add back. And you get into those kind of conversations, there's a lot of negotiation that happens, right? If I claim that X amount of expenses are add backs, then people question it quite a bit. I think we got a question over here too.
Yes, sir.
Two quick questions. The first one is about multiples. Is there an average? Because some here calculations they say 3 to 4x multiple when you can sell your business or buying, and then looking online and you're trying to buy businesses, usually you can see even up to like 6 to 7x. People asking for they say the tech space. The second question more on creative ideas for like OPM, other people's money. I know there's SBA financing. And seller financing, but have you guys run into any other creative ways you can get financing from private people money or retirement accounts or something like that?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. I've done it several ways. When I've purchased, I've owner finance, where the owner I paid up front and then did a payment plan to the owner or the seller. I've gone the SBA route as well. As the buyer, you got to at least have 10% down to cover it. You can have the SBA pay a portion and have the seller do a seller's note as well. So it's different ways to definitely buy if you're looking at buying a company. But you're going to definitely have to have some cash of your own, no matter which way you go with it. So you guys have any thoughts on it? Tom, you're probably more experienced on the buy-in.
The first 8 deals we did, we had no money at all. So the first one was kind of a creative partnership where we had our company, they had their company, we formed another company that we were 50-50 partners of, and then we gave them credit for the value of the clients that they had in that company, so that if we sold the whole thing, they would get the first X amount of dollars. They get, let's call it $1 million, right? They get the first $1 million, then we'd split everything else 50-50. So it was a very creative way of trying to get a partnership going. It also helped if it didn't work out, we can move the clients back to the person's previous company and just kind of dissolve the whole thing. So we used that three separate times. A couple deals, we just merged people into one of those entities. And we had a couple instances where we had earnouts where we said, hey, your business was worth X, and as long as those clients are paying, we'll give you a percentage of all the paying clients every month. And it really comes down to what situation someone's in, right? If they really want to hey, I got to get rid of this business, it's going to be easier to negotiate those kind of things versus, hey, I love what I'm doing. I need cash up front, otherwise it doesn't make sense.
And so let's answer his next question. And literally we all can hear EBITDA from 3.5 to 20 times, right?
Yeah.
So talk about what size do you need? If it's $1 million company, right? What would you think roughly, right? I mean, there's all factors involved, but what would be an EBITDA for $1 million company?
$1 million EBITDA or
EBITDA?
No, yeah. No, their top line is $1 million.
Yeah, so it comes down to what's the net profit of the company. Yep. So let's say you're running at 10%, $100,000. I think you're probably only going to be able to get like $200,000-300K total for that value. It's like 2 to 3x, because the business isn't stable enough for someone to really believe in it enough to say, okay, I'm going to give you a high, big number. Once that EBITDA starts going up to, call it 300, 400, you're probably in that 3 to 4x range. When it hits 500K, I see 4 or 5x, typically. And then you get closer to the million, you're probably 6, 7. I know someone that sold for 8, but it was a special deal. Yep. But like that 6, 7 range is pretty common.
When exceeding, so let's say if you're a 3 million, right? Are you still looking around that 5 to 7, or are you potentially 8? What does that look like?
Yeah, it comes down to really the EBITDA itself. Like what's the value?
Say they're 10% EBITDA.
Yeah, so if you're a $3 million company, 10%, so 300K, you're still probably around that 3, 4x.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not going to change. The EBITDA matters a lot because at least in the world that I've been through, someone's saying, hey, I need to get paid back. What's the free cash flow of this business?
Yep.
I need to get paid back. They're also going to look at the growth rate as well. So if you're losing customers or you're not growing, you're flat, that's going to push the multiple down quite a bit as well.
Does that answer your question, help you there?
Yeah, thank you for that. And then quick question on the clarification of the SBA. Can you mingle that with seller financing? Sometimes I heard you can only do SBA and no seller financing.
You can. The last deal I did in September, I did 10% down plus legal fees and all that good stuff. SBA, and then I think it was like 250,000 of it was seller financing.
Okay.
The SBA, though, the bank is going to look at your debt and your payment to them as part of your debt ratio, right? So it can hurt you. So, they said, hey, Will, besides doing 2 years, I need you to do 3 years. And so you have to work with the bank and the seller if you're going to do both.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
On the smaller size of the spectrum, at let's say 2 to 4 million top line, for valuation, do you normalize some expenses like marketing? I could withhold it for a couple of years and do it at 2%, or I could keep pouring the gas on the fire and do 20% every year just to keep growing. But then I don't want it to hurt the valuation at the end.
Yeah, for me, I always tell people just do what you would normally do if you weren't going to sell the business. Like how would you run the business if you weren't going to sell? Typically, if you run it a certain way, it's going to have a certain growth trajectory. And if you dump more marketing, doesn't mean that you're going to get more sales necessarily. Or if you don't do enough marketing, you're probably not going to get any sales either. So what's the right ratio or the right amount that you would put into marketing on a regular basis to just run the business? And if you're running your books clean, anybody should be able to come over to you and say, hey, let me look at your books. Here's your EBITDA, last 12 months, great, it's worth this much. And then if that's not enough money, right, you go ahead a few more months, another year, whatever it is, and see if you can keep building it up. But I see a lot of, actually I want to bring this point up. Some companies are doing over 25% EBITDA, and I've seen MSPs do 30, 35, 40% even. And the issue with doing this really high portion, percentage of EBITDA is people don't trust that you can keep running at that same high profitability. They think maybe the business is being run too hot, and maybe you don't have enough people somewhere, or maybe you skimped on the marketing, right? And they think there's a chance that it would go down. So I feel like running it around that, if you can get to that 20, 25%, that's ideal. If you're spending more money on marketing and it continues to grow, then great. If you're not spending anything on marketing, you got to have some kind of growth rate to kind of command higher multiples in the end.
I also want to add, definitely not sacrifice marketing for a better result and valuation, unless you're willing, you're selling next week. I think marketing is the key. You're going to continue to grow your company to sell it better. So don't sacrifice marketing.
But at the same time, if you're doing 4 million and you're 10% and your EBITDA is 400,000 and you're going to exit for maybe 1.2, 1.6, if you focus on getting that EBITDA up to 20, you're going to double what you get back. And it's tremendous. And you do get a higher multiple if your EBITDAs are above 30 and north. And the payouts are tremendous. You work so hard at this business. You got to make sure that, yes, you're growing with the marketing, but you really want to focus on EBITDA because that's really what's going to pay you your multiple back and change your life.
So before we go to another question, so you guys stay right here. What's the expectation? You're not the big boss anymore, and especially for you two. You're not the boss anymore. You're part of the team. How did you guys get a mental mindset to step into that role?
All right. I think my case was a little different.
Yeah. Yep.
We talked about this. I am the big boss, and I made sure it's in the contract that I make 100% of the decisions. They came back with, if I grow the EBITDA by 10%, I can make 100% of decisions without running anything by them. And I got that in writing.
No.
Because I had a lot of plans. I also showed them the plan. I showed them the growth package. They really believed in me, and they saw the growth. So I'm still making all the decisions.
So you're, and we were talking in the back, your company, well, the PE firm owns 58, but you guys are run independently on yourself. So you have your own books and everything. So that's another way of, if you want to sell, that's another way.
Yeah, that was the only way that I could sell. Yeah, Evergreen owns about 58 MSPs now across the country, and they all run independently. There is no rollover. There is no central RMM tool. I kept all my tools. Everybody keeps their own tools.
Yeah.
And I don't know when the roll-up will happen, but at one point it will, but not the next 4 or 5 years.
See, and and there's two different approaches to that, right? You know, David's company, same, you know, individual QuickBooks, individual tools. When I acquire someone, I want as fast as I can to get rid of their tools so I can cut the cost out, right?
Yes.
And Tom, we were talking in the back room.
Yeah.
You're doing the same thing. And can you talk about why you do it? And David, can you talk about your benefits with Tom, if you can go first?
Yeah, so the reason why we fully integrate the companies is to definitely save on the tool cost, right? Eliminate duplicated expenses across the board, you know, boosts profitability. But I think even more than that, it's right to have one culture and one team. So when we show up to work every day, we're in 10 different cities, but everybody's like, hey, we're Team ITS, and we're all here. We all follow the 3 core values that we have, and it feels like one cohesive company versus being fragmented all over the place.
Sure.
And you know, with Evergreen, I think this is a different strategy,
Yep.
right? So I don't know there's one better than the other. I think maybe it's just like more of a personal choice.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends how you feel. I wanted to be able to make the decisions because I believed in what I was doing and the energy and this community. You know, I wanted to come in like a day like yesterday and spend $70,000 with TMT and don't have to call anybody. And I did. So that was the freedom that I wanted.
Yeah. So Michael, how does your group do it?
Yeah, you know, again, I wasn't for sale originally, so I'm talking to these people, and if I wasn't comfortable with them, I wouldn't have done it, you know, just so. Because it was a strategic acquisition in the same space, and I was getting their vision for where we wanted to go with the business, I got excited about that business. The experience has been awesome. It has not disappointed me at all. The people are all like-minded. We're all pulling the same direction to grow the business and be the best that we can be in that. And as of this point, they haven't made too many changes in the last 20 months. I still do a lot of the same things they did before, which is exciting. Plus, I'm at a leadership level, so I get to be involved in that process. And it's been exciting for me. Now, not everyone else has that experience out there, and it's very possible. You are under an employment contract. You could technically be gone tomorrow. So you got to be very careful with your in. You have to make sure you're getting enough money so that if for some reason you're gone tomorrow, you don't have to be a Walmart greeter, as somebody said before, and be comfortable with what you're getting.
And I think but again, if you guys can go back and look at what changed from the mentality of, again, you're still sort of the big boss, right? But what changed, and maybe the ones you acquired that stays on, what changes for them, and then setting expectations of how long you want an owner to stay on. I think, David, Michael, you said 3 years. You did 3 years. David, you did 2 years. You know, I think the owners, you know, you can't sell and be gone tomorrow, right? And a lot of times 6 months, a year, 2 year, 3 year. But what are you trying to accomplish when you buy a company?
Yeah, for me, our ideal scenario is that people want to stay and focus on what they love to do, and then be there for the long haul, especially the second sale.
Yep.
So we're saying, hey, you know, in my case, right, get paid some money up front, roll equity forward with the bigger group, and then keep building to get to this second sale and hopefully have this bigger bite of the apple as everybody talks about.
Okay.
And maybe to answer your other question, even though I still run ITS as the CEO, I have to report to private equity at this point. Yeah. And private equity on the board, you know, they have 2 votes, I have 1 vote.
Okay.
So definitely outvoted. And for the first 2 months after we did the deal, I sort of felt lost a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to do? And then I kind of just told myself, I'm like, I just got to do the best I can. If I can't perform or whatever, and I get fired, right? It is what it is. But if I don't try, then I'll never know.
Yep.
So I just went back to work.
Cool.
Also, actually 3 years. My contract is 3 years. My goal is, what has changed for me is now that I've seen numbers for all other companies, my ambition, my goal is to help the other companies within Evergreen. Maybe a combination of introducing TMT to them and show them what TMT did for me. So I'm looking for helping the rest of the companies after my 3 years or very soon to bring them to the marketing and what marketing can do for you.
Okay. All right, I'll go back and take some questions. Start over here and I'll move this way.
Okay. So I was just, we've talked about a lot of different size companies that are being acquired. and I'm starting late on all this, so I'll probably be in the lower end of the spectrum, 1 to 5 mil. And so in the big picture, the question is that segment, is there a lot of transactions going on with purchases in that size, or the ones we're talking about, the larger ones that are 5 million and above, is most of the acquisitions going on?
Yeah, I'll tell you, me not having PE money and me having will money, mine is more the $1 million to $2 million to $3 million range, is what I'm comfortable with right now. I really am not interested in buying anybody under $1 million. As I get my big boy pants on more and more, I'll go to 5 to 10 million like these guys, but just not ready yet, and don't have the money, quite frankly. So
Yeah, I think
there is a lot of purchasing going on.
across the board, it's kind of like a pyramid, right? There's very few companies at the top making a ton of money, and there's more as more companies as you come down sort of the revenue or the EBITDA scale here. So there's quite a few companies around the $4 or $5 million revenue range, that are out there. There's a lot more at the $1 to $2 million range. And having gone through some transactions where people were doing $700K and some that are doing $4 million, $5 million, there's a definite mindset difference. On the smaller revenue companies, their mindset is almost completely different than the people that are doing 4 or 5 million. Like David's saying, hey, I put marketing in place. I'm doing all these things to grow the business. That mindset's not there usually on the small scale. Because if it was, they would have put marketing in place. They would have grown to the next level of complexity, ceiling of complexity, as I call it. The 1 million, can I get over that? Cool, you can. Then it's 2 million. Then can I get over the 2 million to 3 and then to 5? And so if they can get to those different levels, people learn along the way and they mature a lot. And so the companies that are bigger, they have a higher level of just mental maturity from what I've seen.
I see also that with the smaller companies, the owner is the company,
For
right?
sure.
If you buy, the two I bought last year, they're like, oh, I love Michael, I love this guy. I don't want to lose him, right? My idea is they're eventually going to be gone, over time, and so you have to build that rapport. So it's a lot more work when you're buying a smaller company versus like me. I'm involved about 10 minutes a day in my MSP, and my CEO calls me and gives me an update. So it's not about will anymore in my MSP. It's about the company at that point. So the larger you get, you're able to get to that point. But David, Michael, any comments on that?
Evergreen, I think, as far as I know, they're looking for 3 million and up. Those are the range that they are going after, based on what I know.
I would say, if you're not going to get that kind of money that's going to change your life, that you could retire if the company does not want you, you just have to make sure where you fit in that organization. Is there a place and a role for you? And your operational maturity, you were talking about that maturity at a higher level when the revenues are higher, you have a lot more most likely to contribute to the organization they're going to buy. So you just got to be careful of that and where you're getting in there and getting involved in. Be careful with that.
Yeah, coaching, I hear a lot of times people are like, well, I want to sell in 3 to 5 years. But just because you want to sell in 3 to 5 years mean you're not done in 3 to 5 years. You got a few more years after that, right? You were about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say something too. So like the world I live in now with private equity, they don't want to do a deal less than 500K EBITDA. So there's a lot of people that are doing less than 500K, and for me, it's like, hey, how can I help you? Either do your own deal or do better marketing or do something to get you past that 500K to where it makes sense to have conversations. But there's like kind of that floor once private equity comes in, same with the $3 million revenue number. But if it's just like when it was just me, I would be like, hey, does this person fit our culture? Do I like where they're geographically located? Or is it the same kind of, is it MSP work or is it break fix? Like if it's MSP, great. If all those kind of things matched, I'd say let's try to put this together.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Kind of a follow-up on two of the questions we just talked about. So one of the smaller company size, solopreneur, also you said running hot, so high EBITDA. I am looking at some smaller companies in the sub-million, 100 to 400,000 EBITDA. Some of the listings we're looking at listed with brokers and stuff, we're seeing, oh, hey, it's 80% cash flow because they've basically, added everything back to make themselves look valuable.
Right.
So I've seen some companies, they're doing 500,000-600,000 supposedly gross. They're saying, oh, I work out of my home, I have no staff. So when you are looking at those, are you removing from their add backs not just like an owner's salary, but also a tech salary. So you'd say, great, you're doing 500,000, so we're pulling out 100 grand for an owner's salary, we're pulling out 80 grand for a tech because someone's got to do the work, things like that then, to get them back to a realistic number, or just an owner's salary?
I think the way we look at it is who needs to do the work.
Right.
So we came across deals where someone said, hey, you can add back my whole salary. And I go, okay, so you're not going to work here anymore? Like, what are you going to do? And you're like, oh, no, I want to work here. But I figured you'd see that I'm so valuable that you'd pay me for it, right? I was like, it's not how it works.
Right.
You know, if I got to pay you 100 grand to, you know, do whatever, sell or do something, it's like, even if you left, I got to pay someone else 100 grand to keep the business going. Same with even like vehicles. So sometimes people have vehicles in the business, and it's when we look at buying the business, it includes everything, all assets, including vehicles, because the thought is that it takes that vehicle to drive the business, like not literally, but you know, you got to use that business or that vehicle to generate revenue for the business.
Right. And so it's more of like, say it's a solopreneur, are you adding back two salary or removing from their add back two salaries, the owner's salary as well as a tech salary, because they're the CEO and they're the tech, so there's really two roles they're filling. So you have to pull both those back from add back.
You know, like people wear a lot of hats, right? When I started by myself, I was like everything. I'm not going to add back every little person, otherwise the company wouldn't be profitable if I had to hire somebody.
Which is the point.
We got to look at like how much revenue, how many clients, what would it take to service those clients properly, and then put those costs in there. I've seen those same kind of business ads, and it's kind of laughable, honestly. Like, yeah, at some point, you could have a conversation with them. It's always good to have a conversation. Be like, hey, listen, I know you want to add back your salary and all this other stuff, but reality is I got to have techs that do this work. So you're really making this much money, not this much money, and I'll put an offer in at this range. And some of them, most people are trying to get the most, right? The most that they can get, which is reasonable or obvious. It might take a couple kind of wake-up calls to say, hey, I really think the business is worth this. It may not be the right number for you right now, and then you just wait and come back, and then when it sinks in, maybe they're ready to do a deal later.
And anybody who wants to sell is too small for these guys, come see me.
We got one more over here.
Yep.
Yeah, earlier this morning, Tom had talked about what happens if a deal goes south. And the question is really to Will, is what do you have as far as risk mitigation when you've got a personal guarantee on your SBA loan? What's the cautionary tale there?
Have a lot of balls. Business is risk. When we started it, when all of us, right, we take a risk every day. Are we going to be able to pay our employees? Are we going to be able to pay ourselves? Are we going to be able to pay our vendors, right? It's a risk. And the same thing, it is a risk. I'm definitely looking like the rest of them is looking, if they have a very large client and that's most of their revenue or 20% or more of their revenue, I'm a little concerned, right? And if they have a lot of break-fix clients, it doesn't, yes, can I convert some maybe, but how hard is it really for me to do that? You are going to lose some clients, so that's a factor you got to think about as well. Now, it varies, right? It depends on how you treat the situation. If you go in and rip everything out and remove the owner's gone and everything changes for the worse, you're going to lose more clients. I've heard up to 25% loss in the first 12 months of clients. I acquired 2 last year, and I've lost 4 of, I forgot how many of those clients. I think they had about 70 each or something, 60 or 70 each. But I fired 2 of the 4, and the other 2 left because they wanted someone local. You're going to lose something, but it's all about taking the risk. Right. It really is.
Yeah, no secret sauce there.
No, just jump in. And unless you guys have a secret.
I think that's where the due diligence comes in.
Yeah.
These private equity companies, the level of due diligence they put people through is extreme. It's extreme. And the reason why they do that is they're not MSP owners. They have no idea what we do and how we do it and all that. They don't have an intuitive sense of how the business works and if it's good or bad. So all they do is look at the numbers. So they're just looking at the numbers. They're looking at, the liabilities. They're looking at, different things that the business has around it. And then they got to make a kind of an educated guess or a decision. So the more due diligence you can do, the lower the less risk you can have, or at least understand the risk that you're walking into.
Yeah, you definitely want to keep your books clean. You want to keep your systems clean, because if you say you have 1,000 endpoints you're managing, you should be able to produce 1,000 devices in RMM, 1,000 devices over here to add up. There's a lot of questions you need to ask, not just from a financial standpoint if you're buying, but you got to be prepared to answer these if you're selling. Is why do you do it this way? Because my first one, nightmare. I learned a lot on my first one. I did it in 2018. It took me, a few years to recoup from the mistake. And it cost me a lot of money and a lot of mistakes because I didn't ask the right questions. So it's really learning from it. I actually have a document, if you guys want me to send it to you. I have a document that I sent out that if you're wanting to sell your company or buy a company, here's the key things the initial questions that I have before the letter of intent is ever done. And then after that, there's a lot more questions behind that as well.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Wayne.
I'm waiting on that document, by the way.
Huh?
I'm still waiting on
I'm
the
not
document.
giving you that document. You're the only one I won't give it to in the room.
So I've started M&A process to buy companies as well. And looking at that 1 to 2 million, we've talked about this quite a bit. What I'm asking you guys, when you start looking for them, what methods are you using to find them? I've talked with one of the peers here, and he had an interesting thing. He took the Prospect Hopper campaign, flipped it around, looked for a list of MSP in his area, and did a Prospect Hopper to do a breakfast and start talking to them. But what other means are you doing, and obviously Will and you, it's what are you using to find them or entice them, get them to speak with you? That's my question.
I'll let you answer first.
Yeah, so back in 2016,
I might get fired if I.
our first partnership was with somebody that was in one of my peer groups. So that was the first one. The second one was a guy that he knew in the general area in California. The third one was direct mail that we sent out to Phoenix. So I'm in Vegas. We sent direct mail to Phoenix. Someone responded to it, got the conversation going. The fourth one was a local friendly competitor in Las Vegas, Adam Kerrigan. So they can come from all over the place, but the relationship is key, right? Like if you're in a peer group and you're like, hey, I think you and I can work together, there's more of a chance for it to work out because you already know maybe each other's numbers and how you operate and all that kind of stuff versus sending out direct mail, picking up somebody, you got to build that relationship from scratch. And then you may not know all of their personality quirks. That happened to me. It's like, oh, really great at the table. And then as time went on, I was like, whoa, that's interesting behavior you got here, So, and I guess the last thing I'll say for finding it, Adam, I'll speak for him. That guy is a cold calling machine. He can get on the phone, dial 60 people a day. We started using Seamless.ai to pull phone records, get people's cell phone numbers and all that. Cold calling definitely works. We've seen it work, generate a lot of leads.
Yep. I use Seamless AI. You got to stop using that. No. So Seamless AI, LinkedIn. I actually had an admin look at the 20 pages deep in every market I'm in on Google. And Google managed services, managed IT services, and every company, if you're 20 pages deep in Google, I know your company name. And so that's one way to do it. And then using a prospect hopper or cold calling or something like that, definitely. But not just, and Robin's I'm gonna get fired for this, but everybody in here is a good contact, honestly, right? You go to IT Nation and other big major events and in the IT community, everybody is, talk to people. Don't just sit in the corner. And believe me, I know you don't sit in the corner, but don't sit in the corner. Get to know people. If you're looking at buying or looking at selling, you want to know who do I want to sell in the future, right? Who aligns with the values versus selling or buying? Who aligns with that? That's how I do it. Now you got me fired, but thanks.
Yeah, Robin is texting. She's saying, tell me not to say those things.
Luckily, I control the email, so my email's not cut off yet. Yes, sir.
Hey there, guys. So I'm noticing a trend of like solo owners doing a lot of acquisition stuff, and there's mergers, of course. So my question actually tailors toward the merger side. We have a scenario where we're exploring 3 equal-sized, exceptionally equal companies overall. So let's just leave the valuations as a standard, if we will. In different territories in Canada. Can I get a yay from the 3 more Canadians? Nice. So we're exploring that as a rocket ship to growth, and then eventually we'll get to that acquisition side of things, which makes a lot of sense. But us being in different territories, 3 separate owners, all probably being 33%, or will be, I would imagine. Tips, go.
And Tom will answer this. So merging, right? Have you ever been married before? Are you married or have been married?
I am.
You are.
Hopefully after this week, still happily.
Yeah, after she's sitting in the back, so after hopefully I'm still as well. But think of a merger as a marriage, right? You're going to have problems. You're going to disagree. You want all the legal piece of it worked out up front. You want the things, if you're going to merge, what EBITDA are you going to get to when we both automatically say we're going to sell, right? Control that up front so you don't have the arguments later. Now, is arguments still going to happen? Absolutely, right? It is like a marriage. So if you want a business partner, that is a whole nother ballgame, right? You're not the only boss then. So, but you've gone through a merger.
Yeah, I mean, we've been through a few different mergers. Some were smaller, and it was easier to bring people in because the owner just wanted to focus on one thing or another, and we could do everything else. The big merger we did with Rob's company and Dan Zadorik's company was a major ordeal. We mapped out the org chart. We're trying to figure out, okay, who's going to run the company, who's going to run this department, that department, what's everybody going to do? Get super clear on what that looks like. And I totally agree with you. Like, there should be a number in the future of, hey, if we get to this EBITDA amount or we get this multiple, then we can exit and everybody's okay at that point, because then we're not arguing later. Because starting out with knowing where you want to go is super helpful. Otherwise, there could be too many discussions and it may never happen.
But one thing he said, which is concerning to me, is, hey, we'll all be 33%, but you don't know that those 3 companies, one might have a much higher EBITDA and things like that, and that person's going to want a little bit more percentage of the business because they're worth more. So you have to work that out, right? I mean,
We've explored all of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a really important part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Does that help?
Thanks.
Cool. No other questions? All right, guys. So now let's go back about the integration of tools and stuff. And I don't think, David, we got your answer, but why does your PE firm keep it separate? What do you think the philosophy of that is?
The answer that I've heard is that's the system they believe in, because they believe that every integration averages between 15% to 16% customer loss during the first year or first 14 months, and they're trying to avoid that. They want 0 customer loss, so that's the plan. It's a totally different approach. They don't want that customer loss. I don't know if that's happening. You guys probably know better because you guys do it the other way. But the benefit that we get is because they have 58 companies, and let's say 40 of us are using Datto RMM, they go in and get the discount from Datto for all of us. And they go to ConnectWise and get the discount for the rest of the people who use ConnectWise. So we get a lot of discounts. My cost has gone down a lot because of the power of purchasing. That's the limit they interfere. Because the ultimate goal is, I think it's the same, and I have the same goal as they do. We both want to grow the companies, and that is the method, a preferred method by them, to not to mix anything at this time, wait a few years, and let them run independently.
So let's talk a little bit, and I don't see any questions right now, but let's talk a little bit after the merger, right? What processes did your company go through to start integrating things together, talking to the customers and everything? Talk a little bit about the process after, maybe in just a high level.
For me, for us, it's a lot about communication with the staff and the clients. Employees lose a little trust. I mean, the company I merged with, there were over 1,000 employees worldwide. Like, we're just a small part of a bigger machine now. So you got that concern. For most part, since I was still there, the clients were mostly stayed and were not a problem or an issue, things like that. We did not merge tool sets yet. We're working on that now, even though it's 20 months in, because everything was good. It's my understanding that from a valuation perspective, eventually all those companies should merge tool sets because they're going to get if they exit, they're going to get a higher valuation. But mostly just communication with the staff and the people and just making sure that everyone's in alignment, that they really haven't changed my processes. I run my team the same way. They haven't tried changing anything.
Good. Tom?
Yeah, I guess for me, the integration process starts out with, we have a kickoff meeting. So when the day the deal is done, we fly a bunch of people out to their location and say, hey, welcome to the team. We're really excited. We bring all of the pertinent information that people have questions about. We have an FAQ literally, like people have questions about their pay, people have questions about the benefits. How does that all work? What am I going to do tomorrow? That kind of stuff. So we go through a lot of that initially on that first day or two. Then we spend another couple weeks just meeting with all their clients, saying, hey, things are going to change a little bit. It's going to be similar. It's going to be the same people that you worked with before, but the invoice might look a little different, right? The price will be the same though. The ticketing template will look a little different because we have to have it on one ticketing system. So we do that, and then within the first 30 to 45 days, we migrate the ticketing system into our system, so we're using Manage, and once that's all in place, we can then send invoices out, have all the accounting integrated. So our goal is really to have the integration done within 3 to 4 months. There's some long tail stuff, like switching out BDRs, it takes a long time. You gotta go on site, swap everything out, right? That could take a few months, maybe 6 to 9 months max, but by that 9th month, we should be completely done, fully integrated. Everybody's on one team, one platform, all of that.
Yep. And that's what we do as well. We got a 120-day project plan from the time of signing of what we talk to the employees about, the new integrated employees, their benefits, new offer letters, all that good stuff, their pay, everything. We actually have the seller, the owner, call the customer, explain what's going on. We sort of help craft that message. They follow it with an email that we craft the email for them, copies me on it. I turn around and reply back with a crafted email, and it has a link to schedule a time with me, my COO, and the seller to sort of introduce herself. We'll do an initial Zoom meeting. We will do things that we'll actually send cookies to all their offices. We actually send the shock and awe box. So we treat them like a new client. So we will send the shock and awe box, hey, here's all about us and everything. But yeah, we reassure them invoice is not going to change. Yeah, the logo is going to change and stuff. But hey, if you want to keep calling the number, that number is going to forward to our support desk, not a problem. We do, and go into the operational side of things, we break our techs out in teams. So we have 5 teams of techs, and so we have like level 1 through 4s on each team. And so when we acquire someone, we might add someone to the team, but I don't want them to call in and get John Doe that they've never talked to before, right? I want them to continue getting as much as I can the same team that they're used to talking to. But again, it's a long process, long project plan for that. Yes, sir.
So my question is really around multi-year contracts and how that affects the valuation. I remember Jeff Farr, I don't know if he's still here, when I did Rapid, he was, I think, basically saying that you're going to leave like 2 to 4x on your valuation if you have clients on month-to-month contracts. Well, I'm pretty sure I think you have the same opinion. If you went to any of Paul Sissel's sessions, I don't know if he's still here, he'll say not just multi-year contracts, but evergreen contracts. But then I talked to David, who sold his business at an incredible multiple. And he was telling me for him, it wasn't that much of a factor. It was a lesser factor, and there was other factors that were more important than having clients on multi-year contracts. I spoke with Satima Fowler on Wednesday night. I don't know if she's still here. She's clearly crushing it, and she had a similar opinion too. So it kind of feels like I'm getting conflicting information. So I would love to maybe have that debate here.
So I'll start and say it's my comfort level that someone has contracts. You can't force someone to stay in the contract. I don't care if you have a contract. If they want to get out legally, there's ways to fight it, right? So mine is about the relationship, but we do have contracts. It makes me feel more comfortable if the seller does have contracts in place. But I think I probably lean mentally to give more, a percentage higher if they do have contracts, if they don't.
Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying about Satima. I haven't seen that the contracts matter all that much on the valuations. Most of what matters is when did these customers start paying? How have they been paying? Are they continually paying? What's the attrition rate that's happening along the way? And if you have a customer that's paying 20 years, let's say, and they got a contract that's 20 years ago, which we've had that situation, and the contract language 20 years ago is not great, but they're still paying 20 years later, not a problem, right? Most likely they're going to keep paying for a few more years.
Yeah, same thing we talked. I basically 2 months into conversation, I'm asking Evergreen, hey, you want to see the contract, length of the contract? They're telling me to them it's irrelevant. They don't care. I have 1-year contract, not 2 years and not 3 years. But they said that it does not change the evaluation by a big margin.
And for me, I have no contracts. I technically was break fix, and my multiple was significantly higher than whatever was mentioned on the stage. Because when they do the due diligence, they look back over a few years, they can see consistently redoing. My EBITDA was well above 30% consistently, and I got paid for all that. I get paid for all that. You will get. It's the quality of your earnings is really significant in that. And if you've got that and you can prove it, they're not going to ding you for it. At least in not my case.
The payables are very important. If you're consistently getting paid,
Yep.
I'll mention that's the key.
And as Tom mentioned, the churn. If your clients are consistent, that as well. They look at that. They look at the top clients, and not too much of a high concentration in clients. So high,
And that's where my head's at, basically. It's like if you have a churn that's damn near zero and you have an incredible NPS and CSAT and, I think those things like tell a powerful story. And the question really comes because the contracts do invite a bit of friction into the sales process. Not that I'm scared of it, but if I don't need to have it there, then great. Like, I'm sure we have MSAs and SOWs, but, we tend to keep our clients unless I fire them.
Right. Now, that does matter now. Now I'm part of a huge organization, and they want the contracts because when they go to exit somewhere else, they need to show those contracts. So at a smaller level, but when you're at a very large level, they want to see those contracts and need to have them.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and on the contract piece, it's if you're 1 year, month to month, whatever, I think it's the churn rate. If you see that client's been there 12, 15 years, you don't have a high level of churn when it comes to clientele, the valuation is going to be there.
Yep.
So I think it's just more of a comfort level for me, but the valuation is still there. That's a mental thing. And see, guys, Wayne got me in trouble because Robin's standing over there with her arms crossed staring at me right now behind the thing, scaring me. Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate it. Love you. All right, guys, any last words here to share if they are going to sell or they're going to buy? What's a key point that we haven't talked about?
For me, if you're going to sell, just make sure the numbers, make sure the number's enough that will change your life, that you don't need to work anymore, and the after-tax money, go to a financial planner and make sure that's it. I think a lot of people that might be exiting at those lower multiples, it might not be that much life-changing number. And again, you might have an employment agreement with them. That employment agreement can be easily broken or phased out for a couple of years. There's no guarantee you're going to be there. So then you have to worry about what am I going to do? What's next? So make sure it's earth-shattering, life-changing number. But I would say before you go to sell, make sure your earnings are phenomenal. Make sure they're as high as they could be. I didn't have a $10, $20 million company. I had a much smaller company, and I got a crazy multiple that changed my life. And thank you, Robin, for that, because that's honestly, if I wasn't part of this, I wouldn't have do that.
See, I told you she was
That's
over
true,
here.
All right, my advice, I know these two guys are going to hate me. Don't sell cheap. This shit works. Grow your company and then sell. Get your EBITDA up and then sell.
Yeah, I think as far as selling is one thing that wasn't mentioned yet is when you get that money, have a plan for it. Really think it through. For my own case, I thought I had a plan, right? I talked to 5 different wealth managers. I was like, here's what I'm gonna do with the money. Then I get this money, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got so much anxiety now. It's like a whole other problem, which is crazy, but it's still a problem. And then now I have a salary that's a lot lower and no distributions. But then I have all the distributions sitting in the pile over here in this bank account. So trying to figure out how does my life work, my financial life, my personal financial life, how does that work in that scenario, which I've never been in before. So something to think through.
Yeah, I think my biggest one is sell when you want to, not when you have to. Don't back yourself into the wall where it's an emergency, you have to sell because you're gonna make foolish mistakes and you're gonna get a lower EBITDA.
And I think on the other side of your question was the buy side, right? What should we do with buying? For me, I didn't know anything about this at all. I saw a couple friends of mine that were in different industries start acquiring, partnering with companies, and I asked them, hey, how do you do this? They showed me like 10 times. I go, great, let me figure this out. Let me see if I can actually do it. Just try it, right? It's like with all the marketing stuff, like just do something. Just start doing something. You're gonna get feedback. Did that work? Did it not work? Right? And if you can keep doing it and building up to a place where your EBITDA is higher, then you're going to get to life-changing multiples, life-changing values.
Yep. All right, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.